I will make a few quick points because we have a few new people joining today. Just to make sure that we are on the same page, that each stream of the conference will be translating into spatial issues. So papers presented in each stream would result into a spatial issue, either for corrosion and materials degradation journal, for which there are no paid charges, or for only one spatial issue in materials for which there are production charges. So let this be very clear. And the stream chairs will be acting as the guest editors, and they will be sending you directly the link for how to submit the paper. So it will not be available on the common website of the journal, but you will be receiving the link only via your stream chair, and they will organize. And we have this first session, and which will be chaired by Dr. Viswanathan Saji, and I'll request my friend and colleague Charlotte to introduce Dr. Saji.
Thank you, Professor Singh. So yes, we're kicking off today with the session Corrosion Barrier Coatings. The chair, as Professor Singh mentioned, is Dr. Saji, who is research scientist and assistant professor at the Interdisciplinary Research Center for Advanced Materials at the King Fahd University of Petroleum and Minerals in Saudi Arabia. His research interests lies in electrochemistry, corrosion science, and nanobioenergy materials. Dr. Saji, the floor is yours. You can start the session.
A very warm good morning to all. So it's my pleasure to talk about an interesting topic. So the concept of superhydrophobicity is well known to us. So we experience it in the nature in different forms. The celebrated example is the lotus leaf and its ability for self-cleaning superhydrophobicity. Significant extent of earlier works were dedicated on superhydrophobic materials in nature. In the last decade, the research curiosity actually shifted to industrial applications of man-made superhydrophobic surfaces. Let me say a few words about the fundamentals of wettability. So the wettability can be defined as the ability of a liquid to maintain contact with a solid surface. Simply, it is the tendency of a liquid to spread. So the wettability can be defined by, it can be identified by a contact angle. You can see the contact angle. So the wettability depends upon both on the properties of the liquid like the surface tension, as well as the properties of the surface substrate like surface energy and surface roughness, as well as interfacial tensions. So you can see there is a force typical case, complete spreading. It is called superhydrophilic, partial spreading, hydrophilic with a contact angle between 10 and 90, and hydrophobic. And when we have a high contact angle greater than 150 degrees, is called superhydrophobic. So for a surface to be superhydrophobic and for an already hydrophobic surface, so the two important parameters for making it to superhydrophobics are low surface energy and enhanced surface roughness. If a surface has a high surface energy, naturally, there will be a strong attractive force to pull the drop down, resulting in the wettability. A drop on a surface will always try to reduce energy either through interfacial interactions or through geometrical optimization. And so here, the interfacial interaction will happen, and the surface energy of the solid is stronger than the surface tension, resulting in the spreading. In the case of a roughened surface, for an already hydrophobic surface, so there are a lot of air gaps. Actually, these air gaps will make the drop to make effective interfacial bondings. And so the drop assumes a spear shape with a low energy. So In this case, the nano and micro scale hierarchical surface structuring is important. So these are the two parameters important for achieving superhydrophobicity. So the superhydrophobicity is conventionally defined by the Young's equation. You can see the equation, the contact angle is related to interfacial tensions, solid air, liquid air, and solid liquid. And this is applicable to a chemically homogeneous and topographically smooth surface. But when you place a drop on a tilt surface, see, it is called advanced dynamic wettability. When you place it on a tilt surface, at some point of tilting, we know that the gravity is going to win over and the drop is going to flow. And so at this point, the maximum and minimum contact angle the drop can have are called advancing and receding contact angles. And the difference is called the contact angle hysteresis. And the angle of tilting, what we call the roll-off angle or sliding angle. And when the angle of tilting is less than 10 degrees, the surface will have additional self-cleaning properties. So this picture shows for a real surface, when the real surface will always have a surface reference. So it was Wenzel who considered the roughness parameter to the wettability, and assuming that this model assumes the liquid is in complete contact with the rough surface, pinning, and the equation relates the roughness coefficient and the Young's contact angle, Young's equilibrium contact angle to the measured apparent contact angle. So the model Casey-Baxter, it is actually the one valid for hydrophobic, super hydrophobic surface. So it considers the air pockets. The surface now is composed of solid surfaces and areas where the drop is in contact with air. Here they consider the fraction of solid surface area wet by the liquid and the not wet by that. So the air fraction is considered. And this model is valid for super hydrophobic surface. So this picture shows different models of super hydrophobic surfaces. You can see this is a Wenzel model already said. It is a pinning and super hydrophobic. And this is a Latthe state. It actually associates with the hierarchical surface structure. So that will give the surface additional self-cleaning. So it is slippery superhydrophobicity. There is a rose petal state. Even though the surface is superhydrophobic, it is sticky. So similarly, another model is a gecko state. It has also the trap and open air pockets, two types of air pockets. It's a particular model explains. So there are different superhydrophobic models. And so this picture shows different extreme states of surface wettability. See, we have already seen hydrophilic, superhydrophilic in terms of water. And so in terms of oil, there are superoleophilic, superoleophobic, underwater superoleophobic, underwater superphilic, under oil superhydrophobic, superambiphobic states, having both superhydrophobic and superoleophobic, that are called superambiphobic, and there are different the superhydrophobicity in nature. So it is well known. See, these are the examples. So you can see the waxy bumps on a lotus leaf and its nano micro scale surface. So this is a micro and nano, the nano micro hierarchical surface structuring combined with the epicuticular wax layer, hydrophobic wax plus the nano micro structuring. That is actually responsible for the superhydrophobicity in nature. So we are mimicking that. So this schematic shows how a surface having a hierarchical surface structuring can remove the dust and it can perform a self-cleaning surface when compared to a plain surface. So the superhydrophobicity has applications in several applications. For example, in waterproofing mobile phones, preventing ice formation on airplanes, protecting boat from corrosion, in oil and gas, water separation. So you can see the different fabrication approaches of superhydrophobic coatings. So this is a general classification. So where they classified the methods, the physical, chemical, as well as combined methods. You can see the electrochemical methods are there. So it's a electrochemical methods are one type of fabrication of superhydrophobic. So in general, we can classify the fabrication steps into two. So as we already say, hierarchical nano microsurface structuring and low surface energy modification. So in the hierarchical nano microsurface structuring, we can use hydrothermal method, electrode deposition, anodization, spraying, machining, structuring. A lot of methods are employed for that. Low surface energy also can be applied. Some of these methods can be applied, or immersion, simple immersion can be applied for making a surface with the low surface energy modified. So typically we use fluorine substituted silanes or long chain saturated fatty acids as low surface energy materials. So these two steps can be achieved in a single step or in multi-step process. For example, for say magnesium alloys, we can achieve the superhydrophobicity by one-step hydrothermal process or one-step electrode deposition process or one-step spraying, or it can be in different steps. For example, first hierarchical surface structuring, then maybe another steps, then low surface, something like that, and multiple depending upon the applications. So the process, different processes are used. So, but when we see a superhydrophobic carbon nanostructures coating, see for a carbon nano tube or a graphene, that carbon nano tube that formed at a high CVD condition itself is superhydrophobic because of its excellent surface roughness and the removal of hydrophilic surface groups. And a further vacuum annealing, if we taken out and if a further vacuum annealing can further enhance. So there is no need of a low surface energy. But if a further low surface energy, it will again increase the contact, and you can see it on 62 here and on 52 here. And it will also stabilize it will also give extra stability to the surface. Just a low surface energy is enough. We saw that superhydrophobicity can be achieved maybe even only by the hierarchical surface structuring, but achieving a contact angle greater than 120 only by manipulating the surface chemistry. That means even if we use the lowest surface energy treatment, we cannot achieve superhydrophobicity on a plane surface. We need a nano micro scale design hierarchical surface. That is the most easy way to achieve superhydrophobicity. So we can see the methods employed for superhydrophobic coatings, electrochemical methods for fabricating the superhydrophobic coatings. What are the methods? So see this scheme. So see in electrochemistry we have either oxidation process or reduction process. So if you see the two green, they are called anodization, micro-arc oxidation. They are typical oxidation processes for making thick oxide layer on metallic surfaces. Anodization, micro-arc oxidation usually perform at a higher. So these are the two oxidation processes that can make a superhydrophobic surface. See, if you see the red, there is an electrochemical etching and electrochemical machining steps. So electrochemical etching, you know, and so I will show you the example of electrochemical machining. Machining is more for shaping and use high current, and it varies on the current range used and the electrolyte used and the purpose like that. So these are also oxidation process. The yellow highlights are the electrode deposition approaches. So electrode deposition is typically a reduction process. If you see the electrode deposition of metal or metal oxides, so cathodic deposition. So electropolymerization of conducting polymers is usually an anodic process, anodic deposition. And there is an approach called electrophoric deposition, which depends on the colloidal. It is a colloidal process, and it's a deposition of charged nanoparticles. It can be anodic or cathodic depending on the charge of the particle. So there are also other methods like intentional corrosion, electrochemical mediated atom transfer, radical polymerization. Some other methods are also investigated for achieving superhydrophobic surface. So I will show you representative examples on each case. See, this is an on-step electrode deposition process on an alloy, aluminum alloy, whether they use the ethanolic solution of nickel and stearic acid. Stearic acid is a low surface energy component, and nickel is used for nickel plating to get a more corrosion resistance. You can see in one step, and depending upon the molar ratio of the nickel and stearic acid, the surface roughness, contact angle, as well as the contact angle hysteresis or sliding angle varies. And so you can see that particular condition, the superhydrophobicity is achieved by an on-step electrode deposition process. So this is another example where there is a, so it is done in a two-step process on a magnesium. The first step was a layered double hydroxide formation. See, this is a magnesium bare surface having a contact angle of 46. So on layered double hydroxide formation, it becomes super hydrophilic. But on subsequent electrode deposition, with 5 minutes and depending upon the time C, the super hydrophobicity is achieved. So electrophoretic deposition is an excellent coating approach. It is actually a colloidal process where suspended and charged particles or molecules undergo electrophoresis and getting deposited on oppositely charged electrode. When we see the last we see electrode deposition or electrode plating, that is depends on the Faradic process. That is, it is a deposition of ionic species, but here it is a deposition of charged particles. So similar to all the electrochemical methods, it also depends upon the 2 or 3 step electrochemical, 2 or 3 electrode electrochemical setup. So superhydrophobic coatings were fabricated using ceramic oxides, metallic nanoparticles, or carbon nanostructures-based coatings by EPD, electrophoretic deposition. And this is actually a mechanism, the most widely used mechanism for explaining the process of electrophoretic deposition. So it is called a diffuse double layer thinning, the double layer thinning and subsequent coagulation and thereby the deposition on the surface of the charged particles. So this shows an example where a low surface energy material, polydimethyl siloxane, modified SiO2 nanoparticles was used for deposition. And so you can see that the deposition process, the electrode deposition process, it depends on suspension related properties like a particle size, dielectric constant of the solvent, charging agent, zeta potential, colloidal stability. Also, it depends on the deposition parameters like a voltage, time, conductivity, etc. So you can see the average zeta potential varies with the pH, and so this is a maximum zeta potential. So that for that study they achieved, and so that corresponds to the most stable system. Colloidal stability is high there. So that is also analogous to particle size. So when the deposition medium was, they also added epoxy into it. And when the coating has additional epoxy, you can see that the durability, the peel test performance of the epoxy and the coating was high. That means the durability enhanced. So there are different approaches you can do to enhance durability of superhydrophobic surfaces. So this is another example where they made titanium nano belts and then subsequently modified with fluorosilane and subjected to electrophoretic deposition. So you can see the solution and the surface like this. In another example, see laser structured aluminum substrate. You can see the laser domes, and on the surface, the EPD SiO2 was coated. You can see the small. And so in effect, it makes a nano micro scale hierarchical surface structuring. So this can, for example, in the case of a biomedical implant, and it can yield additional bioactivity, and it has several applications it can have. So another method is well known as electropolymerization of conducting polymers. So this is a proposed scheme of electropolymerization of 3,4-ethylene dioxysilenophene, and so the electropolymerization is achieved through cyclic photometry, repeated cyclic photometry. So you can see that the superhydrophobicity, it varied with the chain length when they used a C12 H25 chain and a lithium LiBF4 electrolyte, the superhydrophobicity achieved. That was a better condition for superhydrophobicity, and so it depends upon the condition, and it depends upon the, as we already know, the surface reference, the surface morphology of the deposit, and the energy of the deposit, like that surface. So in electrochemical anodization, you see that a flat surface having a low surface energy modifier.
Sorry for interrupting you, Dr. Saji. You may like to finish in 5 minutes.
Yes, okay, sir. So the contact angle have a 116, but with anodization, you can see, and the two-step anodization, even though there is a surface roughness, surface is still hydrophilic, but on low surface energy modification, it can attain the superhydrophobicity. So this is another example where titanium surfaces with different morphology. See the surface morphology, depending upon the surface morphology, so the contact angle varies. And we can make either sticky or slippery superhydrophobicity. That's a superhydrophobicity with a self-cleaning or not. And we can make by adjusting the electrodeposition conditions. So the anodized templates are well known. See, we can use the templates for fabricating superhydrophobic polymer surfaces. For example, see, you can see the silicon molds with the micro domes, and where they deposited aluminum further anodized, and the polymer is imprinted, and the template is removed, and so the already hydrophobic surface simply becomes super hydrophobic. So you can see the SCM images. So this is another example. See the anodized the aluminum oxide template polymer annealed, and it is infiltrated, and its template removed, and it is very technology important super hydrophobic surfaces. So the micro oxidation is similar to anodic oxidation, but performed at a higher applied potential. See, it is actually, it can make a more thicker oxide layer. So in the case of it is important for metals like a magnesium. So you can the magnesium, it forms a thicker oxide layer, but it has a porous structure, and so they use the conversion coatings to cover that, then subsequently made it super hydrophobic with the silicon. So electrochemical etching, we know the simple process and used to electrode the surface. The electrochemical etching, especially for some metals or for magnesium or metallic substrate, it can make a nano micro scale surface structuring. And that also, with the suitable modification, we can reach depending upon the etching time, the contact angle and sliding angle varies, and that further depends upon the surface morphology resulted from the etching process. So electrochemical machining, see, electrochemical machining, and it is a type of electrochemical polishing steps where they use different setups and more close electrodes. Maybe the anode moving to the cathode, it usually for mass production, and metal removal anodic process, and they typically operates with the higher current densities. So this image shows how the contact angle varies with the machining time for a steel surface. So you can see the surface machined removing the metals, and that itself with the phase modification will make the surface super hydrophobic. So let me conclude my talk. So what we have seen is the super hydrophobic coatings have broad application perspectives. Electrochemical techniques are economical, convenient, and straightforward in fabricating super hydrophobic coatings. It can be used with other methods, or it can be used as a part, it can be used for mass production. Despite several significant research outputs in this area, and so we need a further R&D, especially in terms of the durability of the super hydrophobic coatings. But it is already highly durable, super hydrophobic coating, highly durable mechanical durability, chemical durability, or thermal durability. Highly durable super hydrophobic coatings are achieved in some sections like carbon nanostructures. And even with metallic coatings, we have achieved long durability, but still they suffer from very aggressive mediums like, for example, chloride or very strong acid medium. Similar to other metals, if we put super hydrophobic coated metals also, it will be degrade with time. So these things need to be further addressed. So these are our center members at King Fahd University, and thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Saji. We don't have any question in chat or Q&A, but we have maybe a minute or two for anyone who wanted to ask any question. It doesn't look like, so I will ask you a very quick question. And it came to my mind, and I'm not expert in this field at all. What are the chances of people using additive manufacturing for developing those patterns on the ready-made products by additive manufacturing? Then you don't have to do anything additional for that.
Yeah, actually, I am also not an expert with additive manufacturing, but I think very highly booming area. We may able to. I have not looked into it, but there will be studies on we can make a super hydrophobic surface by additive manufacturing more easily. Maybe.
Yeah, it just came to my mind during your presentation.
Yeah, yes. Actually,
I have no expertise or anything in that area. Look,
yes, yes.
Thanks for it. Looks like that we are both on the same page. So with that,
yes.
I let the floor is yours now. Now you will be chairing rest of the session. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Saji, and floor is yours.
Good morning, all. So our next talk is a invited talk by Dr. Ioannis from National Technical University of Athens. So Dr. Ioannis is a senior scientist there. So he will be presenting on self-healing coatings. So we welcome Dr. Ioannis for the presentation.
At first, I would like to thank you for the introduction. My presentation is a review presentation, and I'm going to talk about advances in smart coatings. The outline of my presentation consists by introduction to the subject. Then I will report out about the smart coatings with respect to the relative materials and their response to a triggering from an environment that can be found. Then we will give special attention to autonomous coatings and non-autonomous coatings. And finally, I'm going to talk about what our laboratory has done with respect to the smart coatings development. And then we are going to talk about the applications of smart coatings. The concept of intelligence has many applications. It has to do with coatings and especially smart coatings. Then it has to do with cybersecurity, with education, with finance, and agriculture. The properties that are affected by either momentary or continuous external stimuli in smart coatings can be related to either localized or general corrosion, to self-healing properties, to fungal that can be used in food storage protection or protection and preservation of cultural heritage artifacts, to fouling for the ships, to piezoelectric properties, and to microbiological issues. Smart coatings are innovative coatings that provide a spontaneous response to changes in the microenvironment, such as mechanical inductions, wettability, heat, light irradiation, pressure, pH variation, corrosive ions. Also, they can be referred as stimuli responsive, environmentally sensitive, or intelligent coatings. The smart coatings can be divided in several categories. Many of them are self-healing coatings, easy-to-clean coatings, active sensitive, optically active, bioactive, anti-funky, anti-icing, fire retardants. Regarding the self-healing coatings, two main strategies can be mentioned. The first one is that mending of defense formed in polymeric coating matrix by addition of agents that can be polymerized. The second main strategy is inhibition of corroding areas due to the presence of corrosion inhibitors, either anodic or cathodic inhibitors. Regarding the self-cleaning coatings, two main classifications can be mentioned. Hydrophilic coatings, that has to do with contact angle with water that is around 0. And another classification is hydrophobic coatings. This is an example from the work of White in 2001, an example of autogenous self-healing coatings. We can see that self-healing abilities are accomplished by inserting microcapsules that have been loaded with healing agents with polymer lasers containing also dispersed catalytic materials. Regarding the self-cleaning coatings, we can see here that hydrophobic coatings have a high contact angle with water. We can see here from the right to the left, as the surface hydrophobicity is increased, also there is an increase in the contact angle. The water tends to spread on the surface as beads, and therefore these beads have an affinity to cover the surface, resulting in cleaning the surface. Now, for self-healing coatings, refer to those that can repair the coating damages and recover the coating's performance with no external or minimal intervention. For protective coatings, the helix effects can typically act by three factors. The first one is restoring the physical coating properties, the sealing of the defects or closing of the defects, and finally, inhibiting the corrosion reactions, either anodic or cathodic, at the coating defects. The self-healing mechanism can be divided in two categories, autonomous and non-autonomous. Regarding the autonomous healing systems, these systems have the ability to repair the bulk integrity or functional properties without any external physical intervention. The damage itself triggers repair processes. On the other hand, the non-autogenous healing systems have the ability to repair coatings using external stimuli that are not generated from corrosion events. The most common stimuli for these types of coatings are mechanical forces, chemical reactions, pH variations, and of course, heat and light. These are very common because they can be easily applied in service environments. And talking about autonomous self-healing coatings, can be reported, these coatings with respect to the protective properties can be reported from two aspects of extracing self-healing ability and increasing self-healing ability. We will talk a few more things about this. The concept of extracing self-healing smart anti-corrosive coatings is based on the use of capsules or multi-channel vascular systems loaded with amount of healing agent or inhibitors and catalyst if it is needed. And the idea of increasing self-healing ability relies on the chemical and physical structure of polymer matrix. Increasing self-healing ability involves mending or repairing mechanical failures, since it is based on the formation of either covalent or non-covalent chemical bonds between the cracked interfaces. So for autogenous self-healing smart anti-corrosive coatings, this can include containers loaded with killing agents or inhibitors. The containers can be micro or nano, and it can be inorganic, they can be organic. Also corrosive inhibitors, anodic or cathodic or mixed inhibitors, and healing agents. For the autogenous self-healing coatings, one category is chemical conversion coatings. These coatings can be defined as the coatings that produce by converting the electrochemically active metal surface to the passive state by forming mixed metal oxide layer. This layer can enhance its chemical and physical adsorption by increasing the wear and corrosion resistance, hardening, and durability. Also, it improves the substrate coloration that therefore can promote its marketability and functionality, and therefore the surface can be made suitable for coating and painting. However, the important properties that must be present for a conversion coating that has excellent performance are the good adhesion, the low cost with high efficiency, good mechanical properties. These coatings have to be environmentally friendly, can be easily applied industrially, and of course can be distributed uniformly over the differing metallic surfaces. So the category of autogenous self-healing coatings including nano microcapsules incorporated into polymeric coatings. These microcapsules can be loaded, as we said before, with agents that are healing agents and can be polymerized. These microcapsules, the loaded microcapsules, can be dispersed in a composite matrix that also contains a corresponding catalyst. We can see from the work of White in 2001 how these microcapsules work. After the crack formation of the matrix, the microcapsules are ruptured, the healing agent is released for the microcapsules and reacts with the catalyst, and the outcome is a polymerization and bond the crack faces close. In the work of Montemor in 2020,
someone is good self-healing.
Epoxy-based coatings were modified with microcapsules loaded with isophor diisocyanate and pH-sensitive cerium 3bis 2-ethyl phosphate. These particles were used as inhibitors. We can see after the crack formations on the coatings, there is a variation of the pH and there is a release of these particles and compounds from the microcapsules. So the healing process involves multi-level protection as well as a synergistic effect that reinforces significantly the corrosion protection that the modified epoxy coating can perform. In the work of Gao in 2020, there was also used micro capsules, smart anti-corrosion coatings prepared through eco-friendly water-based epoxy resin that was combined with non-toxic healing agents. These healing agents were phytic and aminopropyl triethoxysilan, also phytic acid. And these two healing agents were grafted or adsorbed on biomass porous carbon. In the work of Ye in 2020, graphene scenes containing porous polyhedral oligomeric salsequexan framework were synthesized and were used as nanocontainers for self-healing organic coatings. These nanocontainers were loaded with the organic inhibitor benzotriazole, and the final composite was incorporated into epoxy coating. The benzotriazole could be released from the nanocontainers to form an adsorption laser on the metal surface after the crack formation, and the physical barrier of graphene also could greatly suppress the permeation of corrosion medium. We can see here the intact coating included the graphene sheets that were loaded with the corrosion inhibitor. After the formation of the damage, there is an insertion of the water molecules, oxygen and chloride anions. The corrosion starts. Here we can see the reactions, but there is a triggering of the graphene sheets and the release of the inhibitors, and the corrosion stops. In the work of Chen in 2020, regarding also autonomous self-healing based on nano microcapsules, nanotubes were fabricated from titanium dioxide, this one, and they were loaded with inhibitors that were based to molybdate. The loaded nanotubes were incorporated into matrix and they were pH sensitive. And the final matrix exhibited superior corrosion resistant properties, and there was an improved corrosion protection to the stainless steel substrate. Regarding the work of Latnikova in 2011, also with autonomous self-healing coatings, there was the presence of synergism between the passivation effects of the film forming and its water-resisting properties, with resulting to the protection of the metallic surface. We can see here the coating containing microcontainers loadings with alkoxysilan precursors. After the crack formation, there is the release of the metal-organic compounds. Then there is a reaction with the metal-organic compounds with the water that comes from the environment. And finally, the damaged surface becomes passive and hydrophobic due to the binding of silans with a long hydrophobic tail. In the work of Siva et al. In 2021, there was also autonomous self-healing, but this time with nanocontainers with polyelectrolyte layers. There was a development of stimuli-responsive smart self-healing anti-corrosion coatings based on an acrylic resin that had inside dendrimer-like mesoporous-silica nanoparticles. These nanoparticles were loaded with corrosion inhibitor 8-hydroxyquinoline, and also on the surface of the nanoparticles, there was built a polyelectrolyte layer that it was pH sensitive. So after pH variation, the polyelectrolyte layer opened and there was a release of the inhibitor. Regarding autogenous self-healing coatings with nano-containers with layer-by-layer assembly, the releasing of the inhibitors will be induced by pH changes in a controllable way due to changes in the polyelectrolyte molecules. There is a corrosion attack, response of...
Ioannis, please finish in 5 minutes.
Okay. Response of polyelectrolytes, and then there is the self-healing. So also in the work of Chen et al. 2020, standing chain nanocontainers were synthesized by layer assembly technology. These were pH sensitive because they were fabricated by layer technology. They were encapsulated in molybdate inhibitors, and polydopamine acted as multifunctional gatekeeper for these containers. They were incorporated into smart epoxy coatings, and this coating exhibited excellent anti-corrosion and self-healing performance. Also, we have autogenous self-healing protection with 3D vascular healing materials. It is well known from the work of Aragon in 2008. Self-healing structures based on concept of blood vessels achieve continuous delivery of the healing agent due to the defect region, repair large-scale cracks, and achieve multiple healing. In our laboratory, we synthesized autogenous self-healing coatings based on self-healing shape memory polymers. We synthesized non-autogenous self-healing coatings, store a new shape due to the deformation, then restore of its original shape in response to an external response such as light or heat. There was artificial defects on our coatings. We can see the scratch, we can see from the mapping EDS and line analysis the presence of the zinc. The substrate was hot dip galvanized zinc, hot dip galvanized steel, and after thermal treatment we can see from the ACM images that the crack was closed, and also from the EDS line analysis we can see that there is no presence of the zinc. Also, based on dynamic bonds of non-autogenous self-healing coatings from the work of Roy 2015 and Hu on 2017, we can see that dynamic covalent bonds, hydrogen bonds, and ionic interaction have been widely used to construct self-healing coatings. The main advantage of this type system is that the repair process can be repeated for infinite number of times without requiring any second phase healing agents. We can see here the, for example, Diels-Alder reaction of this trimer, and we can see here after the reaction that the crack was sealed. Also in the work of Liu in 2021, the presence of dynamic hydrogen bonding ensured the synthesized polyurethane elastomer of excellent self-healing efficiency. This coating was tested in temperature, high temperature, low temperature, and salt water. Also in the work of Huang in 2018, we can see multi-actions of self-healing protection, triple action mechanism based on corrosion inhibition, based on synergistic action of glass closing percept memory phase, and finally craft sealing of the melting microspheres. And in our laboratory, we have made several studies on the formation of films of either organic or inorganic corrosion inhibitors, anodic or cathodic or mixed, onto several metal substrates. Also, we have synthesized multi-layer coatings that were loaded with additives, and these coatings demonstrated self-healing effect and self-repairing effect, These coatings would have containers loaded with corrosion inhibitors, corrosion trap agents like chloride traps and water traps. Also, this is, as we said, as I was demonstrated earlier, what we produced. Also, we synthesized core cell subs that were used as additives in concrete, and we can see that after 4 days, the cracked hilt was sealed. For the additives that we produce, with our 4 categories: hot gel materials, hollow containers, mesoporous spheres, and layered double hydroxide, we can see here a few examples of core cell subs that can be used in concrete or in corrosion protective coatings. We can see hollow containers that their surface have been changed with more compatible polymers. We can see here for anti-fouling actions, we can see copper-based oxide containers, even cubic or hollow spheres. We can see pH thermo-responsive containers that can release the inhibitor with pH variables or thermo variables. We can see for the corrosion protections containers based on cerium, molybdate, iron, titanium. These also demonstrate photocatalytic action. And finally, you can see here the chloride traps, either layer by layer chloride traps, containers that can be loaded with corrosion inhibitors. And the last slide has to do with the end user application of smart coatings. The application of smart coatings are in following different areas: in medical and healthcare, in military, in aerospace, in automotive, in marine, energy, consumer electronics, construction, oil and gas, pipelines, packaging, and textiles and apparel industries. And I would like to thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Ioannis, for the nice and informative presentation. We have 3-4 minutes for Q&A. So I think we don't have
very quick question.
Yeah, please.
Whatever you presented, Ioannis, sounded like that solutions for all the problems. What are the challenges in this field?
Well, the challenges in this field has to do with to produce coatings that are more environmentally friendly with lower cost, maybe to use inhibitors that comes from plants. Also I have a connected question. See, for a sustained release, see, for self-healing coatings, usually the sustained release is a big challenge, right? Yes, of course. Yes. And in the end of life of these coatings, to the estimations of the life cycle analysis of this coat to be low, and this can be.
So if there is challenge, there is a little bit more time. And Dr. Saji knows that if there is time, can you quickly say that in that domain, are there certain systems which are better compared to others? Like people are talking about helioside nanotube and all that. Is some system better than others?
If I understood, you said something about nanotubes?
Yeah, I said that to address those challenges that you listed just now, are there certain systems which are superior compared to others? You listed challenges. So in that light, do you have systems which are better compared to others?
Yes. Maybe I didn't understand the question. I think he's asking to suggest some better systems, right?
Fine, okay, but perhaps we will communicate later. All I wanted to ask that you listed the challenges in this field, that's right?
Yes.
And my question is that, do you have certain systems which can meet those challenges better than other systems?
Well, if I have any systems that can be better than the already.
All right, we will communicate over email.
Yes,
Ioannis,
please.
because we interact on other forum
I
anyway.
cannot
Thank you.
hear very well. That's my
Okay.
problem.
Yeah, thank you all. And so we are moving to the next presentation. So our next presenter is Dr. Madhan Kumar. He is a research scientist and associate professor in King Fahd University of Petroleum and Minerals.
Good morning to everyone present here. Thank you so much, Dr. Saji, for introducing me. First of all, I would like to express my sincere thanks to the conference organizers for giving me the opportunity to talk about my research. Then, good morning to everyone present here. It's my great pleasure to give the presentation under the topic of recent trends on epoxy coatings for the surface protection of metallic structures against corrosion. This presentation includes the following subtitles. First, I would like to give you basic information on epoxy coatings, chemistry behind epoxy resins and their hardness, and they're followed by the curing mechanism, and also how can we select the proper resins and hardness depend on the end user applications. And also I would like to highlight the important stages and the formulation strategies to improve the performance of epoxy coatings in the desired applications. As well, I would like to highlight some recent research directions to relevant this topic. And finally, I would like to conclude the session. As you are aware of that, corrosion has become one of the most serious problems in the world. Due to the corrosion issues, especially on corrosion on metallic materials, in every country, we are we are spending around 3 to 4% of each country GDPs. So to overcome these problems, hundreds of billions of dollars we are spending to fabricate, to develop corrosion-resistant materials, as well as to improve the corrosion control strategies available already here. Among the corrosion control strategies, the utilization of protective coatings is effectively utilizing technique to protect the metallic structures against corrosion in aggressive environment. When you look at the history of coatings development, initially we started to use coal tar enamel and asphalt to protect the steel transmission pipelines. That can be considered as a first generation coating. Then after developing the fusion bonded epoxy coatings, we started to use a single layer FBE along with the multi-component liquid coatings to control the corrosion on metallic materials. That can be referred as a second generation coating. Then in the next case, we started to use polyethylene or polypropylene 3 layers multi-coating technique along with some dual layer fusion bonded epoxy coatings. That can be referred as a third generation coating. So now the research and development activities is happening towards the development of smart coatings that can have a different multifunctionalities like hydrophobicity, self-healing, self-cleaning, and etc. Among the protective coatings available, like metallic coatings, inorganic coatings, organic coatings, polymeric coatings, ceramic coatings, we have a different kind of coatings based on the chemical composition. So among the coatings available here, the epoxy coatings as a polymeric coatings play a major role in the manufacturing of paint industry. In generally, the epoxy resins are thermosetting polymers which are highly utilized in manufacturing of paint industry. Not only in coatings, it is also used in some structural applications such as flooring, laminates, composites, tooling, molding, and etc. So depending on the specific application, we can able to alter the properties of the resultant epoxy coatings by selecting the proper epoxy resin and hardener. These epoxy coatings are widely used in different applications because of the following merits. They are exhibiting high chemical and corrosion resistance, and they are exhibiting good mechanical and thermal properties. They are showing outstanding adhesion towards various substrate like metallic components as well as glass and wood, and it's having comparatively a low shrinkage upon the curing, and it's exhibiting good electrical insulating properties, and also it is having the ability to be processed under variety of conditions. So whenever I say epoxy coatings, it is made up of two different components. Component A, I can say it is resin, epoxy resin, and component B, two, it is a hardener or curing agents. So these mainly the epoxy resins are prepared by reaction between epichlorohydrin and bisphenol A. Yes. Here, the 1 mole of bisphenol A is reacting with 2 moles of epichlorohydrin in presence of sodium hydroxide. It can form a diglycidyl ether of bisphenol A epoxy resin. When you look at the epoxy structure at the both end, it's having the epoxide ring and along with some number of repeating units. There are 3 different classifications on epoxy coatings based on its structure. There are bisphenol A, F, and Novolac epoxy. Here, the bisphenol A, the A refers because it is prepared from the acetone. The bisphenol here, it is prepared from acetone and phenol. So we coined as a bisphenol A. If it is prepared from formaldehyde and phenol, it can be considered as a bisphenol F. At the same time, when we use some aromatic component here, we can say it is a Novolac epoxy. So here, this table compare the important properties of a resultant epoxy coatings when we use a different kind of epoxy resins. So here the scale is ranging from 1 to 3, and 3 is a highest performance. When you look at the abrasion resistance, adhesion, and resistance to moisture, all the epoxy resins hold at the highest place. But when you look at the chemical resistance and heat resistance, so this Novolac epoxy, it is exhibiting the highest performance. It's because of the highest functionality. Here the functionality refers the number of active sites for responsible for the curing reactions. So now, higher the functionality, higher the molecular weight, which can result to improve the properties related to chemical resistance and the heat resistance. And when you consider the viscosity, depend on the viscous nature, we can select. For example, when we need low viscous, we can go for bisphenol F. When we need high viscous material, we can go for Novolac epoxy. And also other one small issues when we are selecting the epoxy coatings, that is it is having a less UV resistance, because whenever we expose epoxy coating to the atmospheric conditions, because of the sun radiation, it can undergo some photo degradation. So it causes some UV degradation over the polymeric matrix. So whenever we use these epoxy coatings in atmospheric conditions, we can use some hybrid epoxies. That means we can add some kind of UV resistance polymer like polyurethane, or we can add some kind of metal oxide nanoparticles or metal oxide reagent, which can improve the UV resistance of the resultant epoxy matrix. So these are some examples of additional epoxy resin: cycloaliphatic epoxy resin, trifunctional and tetrafunctional epoxy resins, and some bio-based epoxy resins from soybean oil and castor oil. And there are some metal containing epoxy resins like fluorine or bromine, like that. So after selecting the proper epoxy resin based on the end user applications, the next step, we have to select the appropriate hardener, because hardener is the one which can start the curing reactions between the epoxy resins. So here we have a different kind of hardness, like amine hardness, alkaline hardness, or unhyded hardness. But when you look at the commercial applications, in many cases we use amine based hardness because it can easily work in the room temperature conditions. So when you consider the amine based, we have a different categories like aliphatic amine, aromatic amine, cycloaliphatic amine, etc. So here, when you look at the amine structure, it is having the 2 amino group at the 2 end. So both end can able to react with the epoxy resin and can start the curing reactions. Hardeners are playing a major role in improving or in altering the properties of resultant epoxy coatings. So for example, when you consider aliphatic, aromatic and cycloaliphatic amines, depend on the property we need, we can select the different kind of curing agent. For example, when you want to have really high resistance toward heat and acid, we can able to select the aromatic amines or cycloaliphatic amines. So what I'm trying to tell you here, so depend on the resultant or depend on the end user applications, we can able to select here a different kind of amines. And after selecting the amine and epoxy resin, now we need to fix the ratio between them. So to fix the ratio between epoxy and hardener, so here we want to know two things here. The first one, it is a amine hydrogen equivalent of hardener as well as epoxy equivalent weight. By knowing these two, we can able to predict the how much amount of we should take in the ratio amine to this epoxy resin ratio. For example, when you are increasing the epoxy relative to curing agent, we can improve the part life as well as we can improve the resistance toward acids, water, humidity, and corrosion. When you are increasing the curing agent related to epoxy, we can able to increase the curing rate and glassy appearance, adhesion, and solvent resistance and strain resistance.
Dr. Madhan, we have 3 minutes.
Okay, so here it is the requirements of good coatings. There are different criteria. So to fulfill all the criteria, we cannot able to go for the single coat. So in that case, we can go for the multiple coat. When we go for multiple coat, there are different like primer, intermediate, and top coat. Each has their own functions. So here, even though we are using the multi-coat systems, there are plenty of parameters can easily influence the performance of the coating that can result in the failures in the coatings. That these are the important failures in epoxy coatings, like adhesion failures due to inadequate surface preparation and cathodic disbondment because of the high over voltage passed through the coatings, because of we are always using coatings along with the cathodic production systems, and delamination, blistering, UV degradation, abrasion. These are the important problems faced by the epoxy coatings in the real-time environment. So how do we improve the performance of the epoxy coatings? There are 4 different strategies. One, the formulation with additives and pigments. We can add some innovative pigments, or we can add some additive to improve the resultant properties of the epoxy coatings. Then we can blend with the similar kind of resins, like we can take epoxy and we can add some kind of acrylics and urethane. It is a kind of blending to make the hybrid resins. And also we can mixing the different same resins derivatives in proper ratio, as well as we can able to alter the structure in basic resins. So when you want to have formulations over the epoxy coatings, after selecting the epoxy resins and hardener, when we face some adhesion issues, we can go for binding promoters, as well as when we need to import some color, when we need to import some different functions. Based on the functions, we can select the different kind of pigments and additives. So here nowadays, instead of taking innovative pigments in micron scale, we try to use a nano scale materials, because adding of nano materials into polymeric matrix, which can increase the barrier performance. Not only barrier performance, it can also alter the other properties like thermal and electrical and different properties. So the importance of utilizing these nanomaterials into the epoxy matrix, which can improve the polymer and matrix interaction. And also when you consider nanomaterials, we know the important feature, that is large surface volume to ratio. By using this, we can easily improve the properties of the resultant polymer or here epoxy. The main challenges behind this development of epoxy nanocomposites, that is a uniform dispersion. So we need to ensure homogeneous dispersion of these nanomaterials inside the polymer matrix, which can be done using some different kind of technique like mechanical stirring, ultrasonic probe stirring, and ultrasonic bath stirring. The other one, the important problem, when we have the micro voids between the fillers and hosting matrix, it will reduce the barrier property. So to reduce the voids, what we have to do, we have to initiate some interfacial interaction between the nanofiller and polymer interaction. So to make the interfacial interaction, there are two ways: forming the weak physical wrapping of polymeric chains on nanofillers through van der Waals forces, hydrogen bonding or electrostatic interaction, as well as we can able to produce some strong chemical covalent bonding between the nanofillers and the hosting polymer matrix with the use of coupling agent or polymer or surfactant. So herein we developed two nanocomposites based on the copper oxide and TaO2 to target to improve the anti-corrosion as well as anti-fouling performance of the epoxy coatings. So whenever we use copper oxide and TaO2 nanocomposite, we found that the anti-corrosion and anti-fouling performance of the resultant epoxy nanocomposites is increased. Similarly, we used the carbon nanotubes, carbon nanostructures, carbon nanotubes to disperse these carbon nanotubes into the epoxy matrix. It is very tough process because of the agglomeration of the CNT. So to avoid the agglomeration, to ensure the homogeneous dispersion, what we have done some acid functionalization and amino functionalization separately on the walls of CNT. Then we incorporate this functionalized CNT into the epoxy coatings. And interestingly, we found that amino functionalized CNT can easily improve the properties of the resultant epoxy nanocomposite coatings. Then here, this is to replace the zinc-rich primers in the field. So we used the graphite carbon nitride zinc oxide nanocomposites into the epoxy coatings. And finally, we found that water uptake is reduced when we incorporate this nanocomposite into the epoxy coating, because it can lengthen the pathways of aggressive ions from the electrolyte towards the material surface. So from the morning, our colleague Dr. Saji explained well about the importance of the superhydrophobic coatings. So here I just directly going to how we can prepare the superhydrophobic material surface on the epoxy coating. So here making a rough surface from a low surface energy material, and the other one modifying this rough surface with the materials of low surface energy. Still, we are having some issues in developing the superhydrophobic surface on a, epoxy coatings, because usually low surface energy materials are the expensive, and also whenever we expose into UV, because of the photothermal degradation, it can lose this property. And also whenever we expose this material into long-term exposure, it's losing its superhydrophobicity. And also whenever we have some slide, yes.
No, yeah, please conclude fast. We are already over time.
Yes. Okay. Then self-healing properties, already our resource person, Dr. Ioannis, explained very well about the super self-healing performance of resultant coatings. I just skip it. So concluding, and resin choices contain bisphenol A, F, and Novolac to alter the basic functionality and chemical resistance. And variation of hardener permit for improved performance, curing the properties, chemical resistance, flexibility, and light stability. When selecting the epoxy for anti-corrosive applications, it is significant to select the best and most suitable formulation to meet the demand of the environment without incurring the excess cost. Epoxy coatings with multifunctionality still need to be improved to meet the demand for desired applications of epoxy coatings. Therefore, targeting the new functionalities on epoxy coating is the main task for the researchers in the future. I would like to acknowledge my Center Director, Dr. Ahmed Sarur, as well as all my respected colleagues. Thank you so much for the attention.
Thank you, Dr. Madhan, for a very nice presentation on epoxy coatings, which has they have a very wide industrial applications. We have a few minutes for a Q&A, and there is a question from Mr. Sahid. He's asking, what kind of methodology procedure do you suggest to prepare the substrate in order to attain a good quality coating?
Yes, thank you so much for the impressive question. Actually here, and whenever we are having some issues related to adhesion, that is the main problem. It is the surface preparation. In my opinion, the surface preparation is a primary step, but which can strongly influence the resultant coatings characteristics. So to have the better surface, it's, in my opinion, it's mainly dependent on the nature of epoxy resin and hardener. Whenever we are purchasing commercially available epoxy coatings, in the manual itself, they are telling how can we prepare the surface. In some epoxy coatings, we need to go for mechanical abrasives to make some uniform surface profile. But in some kind of other polymeric coatings, we have to go for a smooth surface. So in my opinion, it's mainly dependent on the nature of polymeric resins and hardener. And those informations, when we are commercially purchase the material, it's coming along with all the relevant materials. So how about the surface roughness, even 50 micron or 100 micron, and also this surface roughness, it's mainly dependent on the thickness of the coating. For example, when you are making a 50 micron thickness, we can go for the less than 10 micron to 1 micron surface profile thick roughness. But when you are going higher thickness like 1 mm, so at least we should have 50 to 250 micron roughness. So it's all depend on the resultant coating characteristics.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Madhan. Actually, more questions can be directly contact him through email. So we are going to our next presentation.
Thank you so much.
Next presenter is Dr. Sanjay Latthe. He is an assistant professor with the Department of Physics, Raje Ramrao College, India. So, Dr. Latthe, we welcome Dr. Latthe for the presentation.
Thanks so much, Dr. Saji, Dr. Madhan Kumar. I thanks both of you for giving me an opportunity to present my research work in this first corrosion and metals degradation web conference, which is arranged during 17th to 19th May 2021. So today's my topic of presentation is superhydrophobic coating on various substrate for self-cleaning application. Yeah, from the morning you are listening to Dr. Saji and another one research person, and now Dr. Madhan Kumar. They talked on how the superhydrophobic surfaces are, the basics of superhydrophobic surfaces and their applications. As they have talked too much on the superhydrophobic surfaces, I will not talk too much on it. I just brush out and go to my research. The superhydrophobic surfaces is inspired from the lotus leaf, and you might have observed that the lotus leaf is always clean and always greeny. That is because some of the dust particles, even they get accumulate on the lotus leaf. During the rainy season, the falling water drop can take away all the dust particles, while during the rolling of the water drops. So the water, when the water drop sits on the lotus leaf, the contact angle is more than 150 degrees. So yeah, it is super hydrophobic, we can say. And if you just tilt it less than 10 degree, so the water roll off the surface. So it has very low sliding angle. Yeah, we know that why this lotus leaf is very highly water repellent. Maybe before 1997 or in the 19th decade, we knew that there might be only the wax layer on the lotus leaf. So it was the half truth that low surface energy wax layer is present on the lotus leaf. But as the scanning electron microscope was developed and its use was made tremendously in the nanotechnology, so Professor Bartlett in 1997 first time observed the morphology of lotus leaf under the scanning electron microscope. And what he observed that the lotus leaf not only consists of the low surface energy wax crystalloids, but it contains the rough surface, which is made up of the micropapilla, and each micropapilla is thinly covered with the wax crystalloids, nanocrystalloids. So this is the micro nano hierarchical rough structure which is observed in the lotus leaf, and that's why the lotus leaf shows the highly water repellent property. Okay, so it is a super hydrophobic. So this is the one of the invention made by the Bartlett, and yes, this is lot been talked by the Dr. Saji and Dr. Madhan Kumar. There is a Young's model where on the smooth solid surface how the water drop. Again, if you make the smooth surface into the rough surface, the contact angle can be increased to the hydrophobic range, which is the Wenger's model. Asian Baxter says that if you tune this roughness size, you can easily trap the air pockets inside this rough structure, and that's why the water cannot sink inside this tuned rough structure, so that it will becomes the water drop shows the contact angle higher than 150 degree. So it is just like normal man and superman, like that. This is a hydrophobic surface and super hydrophobic surface, just contact angle higher than 150 degree and roll off angle less than 10 degree. So how self-cleaning works? So on the normal surface, as the contact angle is very low and sliding angle is very high, the hardly sliding water drop cannot catch all the dirt particles while sliding, but on the suprahydrophobic surface, on the contrary, the adhesion between the water and the surface is very low, and again hence the adhesion between the solid surface and the dust particle is also low. So the rolling water drop can catch easily all the dust particles and roll off and makes the surface self-cleaning. So what we did in our research is that we use different polymers and silicon nanoparticles. We make a nanocomposite of different polymer and silicon nanoparticles, and using deep spin and spray coating method and subsequent heat treatment, so we could form a water repellent coating on different substrates like glass, metals, fabrics, plastic, metal mesh, wood, and paper, like that. So there are many surfaces we have tried this composition. Which one is PMMA and silicon nanoparticles. So first we tried on the normal glass surface. So you can see half part of the glass surface was coated with this PMMA silicon nanoparticle, and half part is not coated, and you can see that the water behavior on this both the surfaces. On the non-coated part, it is wetting, and coated part you can see the water drops are like cricket balls, like ball-like structure, perfectly round. So you can see this surface morphology using the scanning electron microscope images. So you can see the silicon nanoparticles are trapped in the PMMA network, and you can see the compact and porous morphology. We also studied the durability test and C and E image. If you can see, in the C we use the water jet impact test, and in the E we use the adhesive tape test, and we could observe that the coatings are moderately stable. We have not gone through for the nano indentation or sandpaper abrasion test, but this stability tests we have tried. In the image D, you can see the self-cleaning effect, where the carbon nanoparticles are spread on the suprahydrophobic coating, and the water drop take away the dust particles. So this is the primary result. And this coating methodology was tried on different substrates. Now, this different surface we have tried to coat on real-time applications. I know there might be some of the issue of the durability and transparency, but we have tried at least to show the real-time industrial application of superhydrophobic coatings. That's why I'm making clear before actually my next results. So durability and transparency might be the issues. So first industrial applications I have made is Activa 3G. This is my motorbike. So when I bought it, I coated it with this spray coater. So normal barber shop spray coater I have used. So PMMA and silicon nano composite, we have sprayed it on the front part of this. And I purposely put, you can see the image one, I purposefully put some dust on the front part. And then by just putting the water from the bottle, you can see that all the dust particles are easily taken away by the rolling water drops. So this is the preliminary work, and this can be done on the big vehicles or cars, the body of the cars or windshields of the cars, so that it can be a self-cleaning. So wiper-free cars can be dreamed in near future. I'm not sure, but durability is the, again, I'm saying the issue. And self-cleaning cars and wiper-free cars can be dreamed in coming future. Building walls. So yes, we take care of internal building walls, but we are not so much interested in the outer building walls. We clear it, we clean it very lazily, but we have coated a building wall, not all the building wall, but you can see in the picture B, the square part. So that square part is coated with the superhydrophobic coating, PMMA and silicon nanoparticle. And you can see that even you put the muddy water on it, so the square part is not getting dirty. However, outside this square part, which is not coated with superhydrophobic coating, so it easily catches the muddy water and get eventually dirty. So it can be dreamed to be having the self-cleaning superhydrophobic wall in the future too. So even though the dust particles get accumulated on the outer building walls, you just put the water from the top and sprinkle the water from the top, and then it can take all the dust particles. So you can see in the picture A, we use the simple barber shop spray machine to coat on the building walls. Next one is the drag reduction. It is again idea experiment, not to be applied directly on the big ships, but this is the drag reduction, one of the application of superhydrophobic coating for the drag reduction. We bought 2 boats, small boats from market, and we have
Latthe,
yes,
we have 3 minutes. Yes.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay, I will go faster. So we have coated the down part of the boat. You can see on the right side of you is the superhydrophobic boat. So you can see that in the 30 seconds, superhydrophobic coat can cover 506 centimeter, but non-coated part cover only 368 centimeter. So you can see that superhydrophobic coatings can be used for the drag reduction. Yeah, the marbles are also facing some of the issues. You might be known for the Taj Mahal, which is changing the color because of the air pollution. So the marbles can also be protected by using the superhydrophobic coatings. Currency notes, this is the 100 rupees currency note in India. So we have coated it with this PMMA silicon nanoparticles, and you can see it is very dry even you put it under the water. Yeah, metals can also be protected from the clothes, The clothes can also be coated with super hydrophobic coating so that it cannot be washable. Just put it in the bucket of water and take out. It can be clean. So the detergent and washing machine cannot be used for in future for the cleaning your apparels. Yes, sports shoes and wooden furniture, they can also be protected against the contact of the water so that they can be again protected. Big window cars or big building materials, building walls can be also be self-cleaningly coated. Sponges can be coated for oil water separation. Oil water separation is another issue and that can be resolved, and there are many efforts are going on to prepare super hydrophobic sponges or super hydrophobic meshes for oil water separation. So what we did is that we used the teak wood tree for oil water separation. We didn't have at that time sponge or stainless steel mesh to buy, so my student used dried leaf mesh. Okay, so they dried the leaf mesh and they coated on this PMMA and silicon nanoparticle on leaf mesh, and you can see that this could easily separate the so this is the scanning electron microscope images. So this is, you can see the left hand side top corner, dried leaf mesh, and modified leaf mesh, you can see the crater like structure. So the oil can go through this crater like structure and water is repelled. So this is the setup for the oil water separation. You can see that the oil is separated and water is still on the top. Okay, so in this case we have separated different oils: petrol, kerosene, diesel, coconut oil and lubricant oil easily through this leaf mesh, super hydrophobic leaf mesh. So these are some separation efficiency. It is of nearly 96%, and number of cycles, it is more than 20, around 20 cycles. So acknowledgement for the DST Inspire faculty team, Professor Sanyu Liu from Henan University, China, National Natural Science Foundation of China, and Foundation of Henan Educational Committee. Thanks again, once again for the organizing committee members for the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Latthe. In fact, actually, he was not in a very good condition. He was recently infected with corona. So actually, we especially appreciate your interest in coming and presenting at this time. So we wish you a fast recovery. So we have a few minutes for Q&A.
Thank you, Dr. Sanjay.
Yeah, thank you.
I wish you speed recovery.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Dr.
I really shocked to hear the news.
Yes.
I hope you come back soon.
Yeah, thank you.
And I have one query, because I'm also working in that relevant area, and we are working together to develop polymeric coatings with super hydrophobic surface.
Yes.
So my point of concern, whenever we expose the polymeric coatings with super hydrophobic surface into some sodium chloride solution, especially, it's losing its characteristics. I couldn't able to sustain the super hydrophobic behavior. Maybe even after 1 week, when I'm characterizing again contact angle, I'm getting like really very less hydrophobicity. So do you have any idea to improve this?
So you are talking about when the polymer with the help of the polymer are used in conjunction with the silicon nanoparticles?
Yes.
Yeah, that problem I also faced that.
Okay.
But I could not resolve it still now.
Okay.
It is also my concern too.
Yes, my concern also the same, because since you are expertise in this field, I need your contribution in this.
Yeah, maybe
because we can able to prepare Now, after preparation, we are really happy to see the hydrophobic surface. But whenever we expose into the aggressive medium, even sodium chloride, even low concentration, after a week, it loses its superhydrophobic behavior.
Yes,
That is really challenging task for me.
Yes.
Maybe we need to work together to avoid this problem.
Sure.
Okay,
Let me know
thank
when you
you.
find time.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I really appreciate.
Thank you, Dr. Sanjay, and thank you for the questions, Dr. Madhan. So I think we are not having more questions. And any more questions, please contact Dr. Sanjay by email. So we are going to our next presentation. So our next presentation is by Dr. Sarah Ulaeto, and he is with the Department of Chemical Sciences, Rhema University.
Thank you for this opportunity to present part of my work that was carried out at CSIR NIST, Trivandrum in India. And I'll be talking about self-healing anti-corrosive coatings, contributions from the phytochemicals. And I'll be presenting on behalf of my group. So for this presentation, I have a brief outline just as a guide for my presentation. And I'd like to introduce what the self-healing concept is all about, which I know a lot of us are quite familiar with. It's modeled after the biological wound healing process, and the idea is to see how this could be applied to meet materials performance challenges. And so we all know that in 2001, the first autonomic healing concept in polymeric materials was introduced by Professor White's group, and that had to do with the Gross catalyst that initiated the ring opening reaction, and this was done with epoxy matrix. So with this, it was more like an opportunity for those of us researching in the area of corrosion inhibition using self-healing coatings. This kind of provided an insight, kind of provided a guide for us to proceed in our work. So the need for self-healing in coating fabrications is simply because polymers are subjected to several environmental changes, and this will alter their initial mechanical properties as well as affect their reliability over time. And so several reactions involved could be photothermal, could be chemical, and they cause external material failure. And this mechanical stress actually, which produces in the form of cracks, will propagate with time. But the idea is, how can this be controlled? How can this be looked into? So I did some work on the basis of preventive kind of maintenance strategy using the self-healing coatings. And the idea was, to see how this could, provide the efficiency that is required. So when we talk about self-healing coatings, you either have the extrinsic healing or the intrinsic healing. So just a brief introduction about that. When you talk about the extrinsic healing, it's actually designed, with responsive fillers, and the aim is to isolate the corrosive ions. And the healing agent now forms a protective film on the metal surface. But when you talk about the intrinsic healing, we're looking at, mobility of the polymeric chains itself, and possibly this involves specific reversible chemical bonds. So for the intrinsic healing, actually, it's the matrix that is actually involved, and this kind of avoids the challenges of integration of external healing agents or compatibility of external healing agents. And the reactions are mostly non-covalent or dynamic covalent bonds. The common triggers are temperature, electromagnetic radiation, such as UV rays and the rest, pH, humidity, or ionic strength changes. So actually, when you talk about the intrinsic healing, we're looking at those reactive end groups that will be able to form cleavages through segmental mobility when there is a physical damage, and that produces a bond reformation and repair. But when we talk about the extrinsic healing, we are looking at how to design the material in such a way that the healing agents are encapsulated. Now, various kinds of encapsulating materials have been explored by various research groups, and this could be either in the form of fibers, tubes, bubbles, particles, layered materials, either from polymer-based materials or from glass materials, or either inorganic porous materials. And the main aim is to integrate them, ensure that they are incorporated into the matrix after they have been loaded with the inhibitors. which now act as the healing agents. And then subsequently, mechanical characterizations are carried out in most cases. And then the trigger, mechanisms are studied, to know which of them that the loaded coating responds to. And then the healing evaluation and validation is considered. And this could be done using various techniques. Either we look at it from the optical microscope, FTIR, SEM, DS, AIS, SVT. Several techniques have been used. Even XPS has been explored, in these recent times. So why do we need self-healing actually? When a coating is damaged and corrosion attacks the material or the underlying metal, if you have inhibitors embedded in it in such a way that they are not deactivated before time, there is a possibility that the corrosion species can be deactivated in the presence of these inhibitors that are leached out on time. But without the inhibitors, you find out that the damage may be healed on the surface depending on the nature of the resin or the metrics that is being used, but then corrosion has occurred underneath, and this actually results in a lot of catastrophic failures. So in a paper that was published in Soft Matter in 2010, it was clearly explained that the encapsulated materials are loaded and in such a way that there is no leakage. It provides a passive behavior when it's not damaged. But once there is an impact that results in a damage, there is this release of the encapsulated material. And that's what leads to the active, inhibitive behavior of this in the scratch plane. So when we talk about self-healing, it's actually an active corrosion inhibition behavior that should occur within the scratch plane. And it could either be autonomous healing, which is related to the extrinsic self-healing, or it could be non-autonomous, which is related to the intrinsic self-healing. So various mechanisms are actually, have been studied and have been, reported. It could be based on the defect healing, where you either use polymerizable healing agents in the presence of a catalyst, or it could be where you apply corrosion inhibitors that are encapsulated and will leach out, from the coating matrix into the scratch plane. In some other cases, like the intrinsic case, you have these dynamic covalent bonds that with segmental mobility, the reactive end groups can, cause a repair. And in these cases, most of the time, you could have, repeated healing effects. This dynamic covalent bond concept actually will involve, some energy in the form of heat or irradiation. You could also have self-healing based on shape memory polymers. And these are polymers that can recover their original shape from a temporary deformation through the help of an external stimuli. And then in recent times, we have been seeing a lot of works, and we have also tried to check some works of multi-action self-healing. This is a situation where you combine the encapsulated material in the presence of shape memory polymers. So you have a situation where the scratch plane has the healing agents released in that scratch plane, which provides a film that covers the scratch plane and prevents the ingress of the corrosive ions, as well as the shape memory polymer now heals the surface, and you have a double healing that provides more passive behavior at the end of the day to the coating matrix. This occurs in various phases and stages: the activation phase, the transportation phase, and then the repairing phase. And these stages, can be categorized under, first of all, surface rearrangement, surface approach, depending on what kind of healing materials you encapsulated in the material and what kind of metrics that you have applied. And then you have the wetting, when there is the release of the healing agents, and then they diffuse into the scratch plane. Randomization, of course, based on the various reactions that occurs in the electrolyte, depending on what conditions have been applied, whether it's an acidic pH or basic pH or neutral pH. But in our study, we are looking at the influence of the phytochemicals being used as corrosion inhibitors. The phytochemicals could be from the leaves, could be from the seeds, the stem, the flowers, the bark, the oil, or the gum. And this basically we consider the plant's biomass, and it could either come directly from the fresh natural resources, or it could come from the waste resources. And the aim is that the extracts gotten from these plants' biomass are now used as corrosion inhibitors because of the presence of the strong phytochemicals that are in it. And these phytochemicals could be carbohydrates, could be fatty acids, could be phenolics, it could be terpenoids, it could be flavonoids. There are a whole lot of them embedded in the plant. In most cases, the whole crude extracts have been investigated. In most cases, specific phytochemicals that have the reactive functional groups are isolated and used. And what we expect, or what has been expected, is that they will form a metal organic inhibitor complex, which forms a barrier to further corrosion, as seen in this schematic that was published in Molecules 2019. So the phytochemicals that have so far been explored as corrosion inhibitors, I just mentioned a few here. We have lawson, which was obtained from Lawsonia inemis, which is a henna plant. We have mannose 6-phosphate from the aloe vera. We have beta-cystosterol from the chlorhodendron. We have catechin from Oncaria gambe. We have piperine from black pepper. We have ascorbic acid from hibiscus and several other plants that contain ascorbic acid. We have quercetin, which is from the neem plant, from onions, from several other plants that have flavonoids in large quantities. We have hamine from Semira tinctoria, and we have phylanthine from Umbilical finalis. Now, the main aim of utilizing these phytochemicals is because of the heteroatoms that they have. So if you take a look at the structures, you find out that they have carbonyl groups, hydroxyl groups, they have phosphate groups, they have large aromatic rings, they have nitrogen groups, etc. So you find out that the reaction centers here are multiple bonds, aromatic rings, and heteroatoms. The hydroxyl and the carbonyl groups present in the phytochemicals are electron-rich groups, which will act as the inhibiting agents. You also have an influence from the molecular size effects. Most of the phytochemicals are large-sized, and this will provide better corrosion inhibitor. And the substituents may also enhance planarity through increased pi conjugation. So it's known that the planar molecules will absorb in a flat orientation. In that flat orientation, they will cover a reasonable area of the substrate surface. And the more hydrophobic alkyl substituents you have, the better inhibition efficiency you could also get. So the organic compounds, the mechanism generally is known that they will displace water molecules while they get adsorbed onto the metal surface, forming metal organic inhibitor complex. Now, what was the motivation behind this study in trying to find out how efficient phytochemicals can be, or how comparable they could be to the conventional corrosion inhibitors? Was because, across my study, I found out that there are other products that have been produced using biomass from 50% to 90% as presented in this table, and they have gone commercial. Even though not all of them have been applied for corrosion inhibition, but they have been applied for other inhibition of other substrates, and they have, been effective. So if you could have biocoating that could be obtained from soya bean, from cashew nut eggs, even from recycled eggshells, or you could have 90% of the renewable resources from the resins and waxes of plants, and they are effective and have been applied either for wood or printing purposes. You also have those that have been applied for non-skid coatings and high traffic flow. And then one of the most interesting parts was when we found out that Desmodo Eco N7300 was you could obtain 70% of its carbon content, and that was the first bio-based hardener that was produced. This was a job that was done between Audi and Covestro. So that was quite an interesting motivation for me, and that was one of the things that triggered this study. So in this study we utilized.
Dr. Ulaeto, we have 3 minutes, please conclude.
Okay. In this study, we utilized quercetin as a corrosion inhibitor, and quercetin is a known flavonoid, has a lot of hydroxyl groups, and the coordination sites could be either the carbonyl group or the hydroxyl group in the B ring. So we prepared silicon nanoparticles and loaded the quercetin in it using the liquid crystal templating mechanism, and we found out that we had shape preservation, structure stability, visible pore healing, and this is the same image of the unloaded and the loaded quercetin complex. And from the DLS analysis, the hydrodynamic size increased after loading. From the TG analysis, we realized that at 150 to 600, there was thermal degradation of the organic compounds, such that we realized that we had up to about 36.46 loaded of the inhibitor in the metrics. From the UV visible analysis, we also realized that there was a decrease in the absorbance of the quercetin after interacting. There were no new absorption bands formed, and there were no changes, meaning that there was no negative reactions occurring. Though we observed color changes, but these color changes are due to the fact that the polyphenols will respond, with pH changes. So from the same EDS analysis, we carried out the measurement test for 15 days using the complex that we had formed, the nanocomposite that we had obtained in 3.5% NaCl. We used 0.5 gram per liter on aluminum alloy 6061. The aim was to find out which pH will be more effective in the release and reaction of the nanocomposite, the inhibitor from the nanocomposite, in protecting the metal substrate. And we realized that pH 10 provided better inhibition on the metal substrate. So with this, we tried to analyze which of the reaction sites are the probable ones, and we found out that from the FTR analysis of the corrosion products, the reaction, the carbonyl group had greatly reduced. There was a presence of ketones. There was also the presence of deformation of the alkene rings. And so at alkaline pH, we observed strong spectral changes in quercetin that occurred at the C-ring position. This has been reflected in the FTR analysis and in the XRD analysis. So we prepared the coatings using the deep coating method, and we loaded different weight percentages from 0.5 to 3. And we also found out the thickness, which happened to be 15 plus or minus 2 micrometer. And with this, we carried out the coating analysis. From the electrochemical impedance analysis, we realized that from the body plot, we could observe from the body plot, we could observe that at the lower frequency, we have a larger impedance, and phase changes also occurred in the process. And then the diameter of the Coley plot also increased with increasing concentration, but we had the maximum efficiency coming from 1%. And we modeled it with the ZSIM software, and we were able to obtain the electrochemical circuits for the analysis. So from the table of the EIS analysis, we realized that the coatings resistance, which is the output, which shows high values, is indicative of better barrier properties, and the charge transfer resistance also at 1%, which also reflects high values, is also indicative of kinetic reactions at the electrode-electrolyte interface that resulted from the release of the active inhibiting material from the nanocomposite on the surface of the coating. So the protective layer formed, increased the impedance of the loaded coatings, and we were able to obtain. Now, in order to validate this, we carried out EIS mapping. From the EIS mapping, you can see that A is that of the substrate that is unloaded, and D is that of the substrate that was loaded and was healed after the 48 hours it was immersed at pH 10. And when we analyzed just the scratch plane here and the healing film that was formed, we realized that we had more distributions of carbon and silicon and oxygen, which came from both the healing agents and some influence from the nanocomposite, of course. But if you look carefully at this EDS mapping, we found out that we had better inhibition, and the presence of these materials confirmed that what we had in the scratch plane was the film that had, the passive film that had been formed from the diffusion of the healing agents to the scratch plane. So in summary, self-healing is actually very attractive outside the academic community because it actually will serve in real-time applications. Self-healing extends the self-service life of materials, and self-healing materials with high mechanical strength will be ideal. So for me, from the phytochemical reaction centers, the multiple bonds, aromatic rings, the heteroatoms were able to displace water molecules, which were able to form the barrier. But then, as a personal contribution, I was going through some more studies, and I found out that for practical considerations, Solene, for example, is one of the polymers that have been used and found out to have survivability for aircrafts and the rest of them, as such that even NASA is considering working with such a material. So I feel that even if we have a good polymer or a good resin such as this, and then we apply, even if we apply the phytochemicals, I believe that we will still be able to obtain enhanced corrosion efficiency. So In acknowledgements, I'd like to thank my research guide. At the time I was doing this research work, Dr. Raje, and the research group at CSR Trivandrum. I'd also like to appreciate CSR Atlas for the postgraduate fellowship that I used in carrying out this work, and the director of CSR List. I'd also like to appreciate the Department of Chemical Science at Rhema University, Nigeria, and I would like to thank the organizers of CMDWC2021 for the opportunity to present this work. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ulaeto, for the nice presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Self-healing coatings. So we have a very last time, 2-3 minutes for Q&A. Actually, from my side, what do you think is extrinsic and intrinsic self-healing? Which one is better? Do you have any suggestion?
Okay. From my opinion, I will not say anyone is better because they both have their challenges. For the extrinsic, you have to load the healing materials in it, and depending on the kind of resin you use and the kind of encapsulating agent you use, you need that compatibility such that it does not destroy the coating matrix, you know, and it does not disturb the adhesion properties that should, you know, be on the substrate at the end of the day. Then for the intrinsic, so if you can achieve that, you will actually have good self-healing coatings in the process. But for the intrinsic, if you're able to also, like I said, I was doing some more reading and I found out that the shape memory polymers are also able to provide very good properties. So if you have the shape memory polymers and have the inhibitors also encapsulated in it, you have a more enhanced efficiency of self-healing. So I think I would suggest the dual, the combination of the two properties will give you, you know, a better result.
Okay, okay. There is one question. There is one question. There is whether you observed intrinsic or extrinsic in your research.
Extrinsic was what I worked with.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Ulaeto. And so we are now.
Thank you, sir.
Finalizing our session. So we thank all the presenters and the participants. We also thank Dr. Ramrao for helping us arranging this session. Okay, thank you.